everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Katarina. Today's video is going to be my February update for my Pantat palette and Pantos eyeshadows. And I got to say, it is a pretty good update, so let's get straight into it. So let's start with my Pantat palette. I am panning the Too Faced Chocolate Bar eyeshadow palette. I started panning this one in January 2023, so I have been panning it now for 14 months. I wanted to continue panning this for about 6 months or until I'm able to finish a few more shades. Last year I was able to hit pan on all of the shades and I was able to finish 2 shades. So yeah, let's take a look into what this palette looked like a month ago. And this is what the palette is looking like right now. So as you can see, we do have another empty shade. So I will put here comparison picture of last month and where we are right now. As you can see, I was able to make pretty good progress. So the shades that I do want to finish are milk chocolate, salted caramel, marzipan and creme brulee. So as you can see, I was able to finish creme brulee. So I used creme brulee for 15 times in February, today being the 15th time. So I am wearing it as my lid shade. In the beginning of the month and in January I used this eyeshadow as a bronzer topper because I thought that's the way it's the easiest for me to get through it. However, somewhere in the beginning of the month I realized that I actually don't need to multitask it. So I stopped multitasking it because there are other things that I do want to work on. I am panning 2 bronzers this year. So the rest of the month I just used it as an eyeshadow. I'm surprised I used it that many times, but I guess I just wanted to focus on it and I wanted to get the shade out so that I could focus on other things in future. Creme brulee was kind of like a dirty gold, a little bit darker, almost leaning a little bit bronzy. And the closer we get to spring, I'm not necessarily feeling a shade this dark as my lid shade, at least all over the lid. So I am really happy I was able to finish the shade, and now there are 3 more shades in this palette that I want to finish. So milk chocolate, let's talk about that next. I wore milk chocolate 28 times in February. This year there are 29 days in February and I'm filming today on February 29th. But one day I had a dentist appointment in the middle of the day, so that day I didn't wear any makeup. Other than that I wore makeup every day. And milk chocolate I do wear as a brow color. So I do wear triple fudge on the outer part of my brow and then milk chocolate towards the inner part of my brow. Also in the beginning of the month I used it as a contour, but I stopped doing it at some point. I don't often wear it as an eyeshadow because, to be honest, it's not my favorite for that necessarily, but today I am wearing it also as a crease shade because I didn't want to make this look too warm. I just wanted it to be this kind of like neutralish golden toned look because I wanted the red lips to be the star of my makeup look today. I think with milk chocolate the progress is probably going to be a little bit slower from now on, but that's okay for me. I would rather use it as a brow color and enjoy it than force myself to wear it different way and not enjoy it as much. Then let's talk about salted caramel. I wore it for 14 times in February. That is surprisingly much. Typically this time of the year I'm not that much into peachy makeup. I don't know, in February I did wear it. But I will say I have not always loved my eyeshadow looks necessarily, or my makeup looks in general. I feel my makeup looks were kind of like all over the place. So what I think I want to do for March is to pick few looks that I'm going to wear and rotate through the entire month. It can happen easily that I will try to put as many eyeshadows as I can into one look and then end up with looks that I just feel don't work. You know, I think that I don't necessarily love a peachy shade like this or peachy makeup like this in winter because I don't have any tan and I do have quite a fair skin tone. and I feel peachy makeup, it can be just a little bit too bright and unnatural looking, so I feel it looks better on me if I do have some tan. But yeah, I need to make this shade a focus shade for March if I want to finish this one before midway through the year. So this is something that I usually, when I wear it both as an eyeshadow and as a blush. So I hope I can find a nice look, perhaps an all matte look, where I could incorporate this shade as my blush and as an eyeshadow for March. But something that is not too bold and peachy, so rather kind of like neutral and peachy. Then Marzipan, that's another shade I wore surprisingly much. I wore it 7 times in February. Marzipan from this palette is my favorite shade, but I wasn't necessarily loving it in February. This is a really interesting shade because the shade appears really different depending on what shade you pair it with. So if I wear it with really warm peachy shades, it's going to look like straight up peach. But if I'm going to wear it with cooler toned pinky shades, then it doesn't necessarily look too cool, but it looks like a pinky champagne sort of shade. And I think the reason why I wasn't necessarily loving it in February is that I didn't know what to pair it with. I know this is a shade that I will love when we really get into spring. This is a beautiful lighter lit shade. But for right now, I just feel I don't necessarily want to wear it. I'm going to take a break from it in March. And instead from this palette I'm really going to focus on Salted Caramel. I have noticed with the shimmers in this palette that they have started to go quite crumbly. That happened with Creme Brulee and also with Marzipan. You can see some progress there. I feel it crumbles quite easily, and if that happens I tend to use more product just because it's all over the place. But yeah, I'm sure it's not difficult shade to finish. From the shades that are left that I do want to finish from these 3, Salted Caramel is the hardest one, so that's going to be from this palette my focus for March. Okay, so let's get into Panto's eyeshadows. I know this is like everybody's favorite project and I have enjoyed that too. I have tweaked it a little bit to fit my needs and my makeup collection. So the way I'm doing it is that I do have here my 4 eyeshadow palettes and then my singles palette, and I'm going to pick something from each of these palettes so that nothing in my collection gets really neglected. So 2 of the palettes, or 1 of the eyeshadow palettes and the singles palette, are older. Some of the singles are really the oldest eyeshadows in my entire collection, and then 3 of the palettes are newer. So with the older eyeshadows my goal is usually to hit pan. With the newer eyeshadows my goal is to use the eyeshadow for 10 times. So I want to start with my singles palette. I'm working on 1 shade from here, but I will say, I will show this to you. My daughter, who is 2 years old, got her hands on this palette and some of the shades look a little bit beaten, like over there you can see some damage. Thankfully none of the shades broke completely. I have seen YouTubers had that happen to them, but you know, apart from some finger marks here, it's pretty okay. The shade from this palette that I am working on is this one over here. So over here, the reddish mid-toned brown in a small round pan. So this one is depotted from the Colourpop I Think I Love You palette, and this shade is called My Type. And yeah, I wore it 13 times in February, so again surprisingly much because typically February is not the season when I'm into really warm toned makeup. But I guess because I had those a lot in my project pans, I wore them because of that. So there starts to be some wear on this eyeshadow, but I think the pan is still pretty far away. I do think that I want to focus on this shade now in March because I can pair this one with Salted Caramel from Chocolate Bar, so I should be able to make some good progress on both. And these shades I am still going to swatch because I think it's fun to see the color story of Panto's eyeshadows. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put to the screen right now the color story that I got last time. So it was really shades that I really do love, but not necessarily this time of year. Okay, so here you can see the shade. This one is nowadays as dark as I typically go when it comes to deepening my eyeshadow looks. Okay, then the old eyeshadow palette that I have in my collection is the Juvia's Place the Nubian 2 eyeshadow palette. And from here I'm working on the shade Ya. It is the copper eyeshadow from the palette, and as you can see, I was able to hit pan on this eyeshadow. I'm so happy to have my first pan on this palette. I used it 3 times in February and it was the 3rd time that I hit pan. In total, this year in this project I used it 6 times. So it was the 6th use this year that I hit pan. But I did have pretty nice dent on this eyeshadow previously. Now, I wore this eyeshadow in my last Pando's Eyeshadows Palette update video, and I was telling how I love my eyeshadow look and how I think it looks so nice. Then, when I edited the video and looked back to the footage, I don't know, I just think it was way too much. I feel copper is one of those eyeshadows that if you are really pale, like I am, it's just going to be a little bit too bold and a little bit too intense, while it looks stunning on people with tan skin and deep skin. And you know, I'm sure there are people with really pale skin who rock copper looks and love it. For me, it just feels that it's a little bit too bold because it's so warm and it's quite bright. But I'm happy to have my first pan on this palette. This is something that I'm sad I didn't use this more in the past because the palette is starting to be older, but it is such a great color story. I love it how it is mainly warm neutrals, but then there are some pops of color here. So we will roll a new shade from this palette, but let's first see the other shades that I was working on in February. So next is the Huda Beauty Gold Obsessions eyeshadow palette, and the rest of the palettes that I'm showing are newer. So with these shades my goal is to use the eyeshadow for 10 times. Now from this palette I got this shade over here, so the 9th shade, the really yellowy bright gold. This shade unfortunately I used 0 times now in February, but the reality just is that this is not a shade that I would enjoy in winter. This is just way too bright. If I'm completely honest, I'm not surprised if I don't wear it at all in March either. Let me show you a swatch of it. It is a beautiful gold over here, but it's just so yellow, so bright. So a shade like this I would be probably more into in spring, in summer, when it is beautiful and sunny outside, because this color really reminds me of sun. Yeah, let's move on. I do have another Obsessions palette from Huda Beauty. This one is the Toffee Brown Obsessions, and from here I got this shade. So it is like a matte mid-toned caramel shade. I wore it once in February and I just realized that I am not into this kind of like warm and autumnal shade in the dead of winter necessarily. So here you can see the shade. It is neutral but it is extremely warm. Okay, then the last palette that I have is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam eyeshadow palette. This one is the newest palette in my collection. I bought it in the very end of the year and I think I got it in the very beginning of the year. So from this palette I of course got the black shade, so the shade Noir, which is over here. I don't know if you can see, but there's just some slight wear on this eyeshadow. So this shade I used 10 times in February, today being the 10th time, and I only wore it as an eyeliner. Happy to have the 10 uses up with this one, so we can pick a new shade from here. Speaking of new shades, let's get into it. Let's start with the Juvia's Place the Nubian 2 eyeshadow palette. So as I said, with older eyeshadows my goal is typically to hit pan. However, in this palette there are shades that I don't want to even try. If I get a shade I just don't want to hit pan. On that case I'm going to set a usage goal. If I get something that is too similar for a shade that I'm already working on in this project, on that case I'm going to reroll. But I do have 11 eyeshadows left in that palette where I don't have any pan, so let's randomize. Shade number 5. Okay, so we're going to jump over to shade Ya. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we got the shade Suri. It is a really pale champagne, and I'm actually really happy because I love a shade like this both as a highlighter but also as all over lid shade, because my skin is really light, so I typically like to go for lighter looks. So this might be the most boring shade for a lot of you, but I actually love it. It's a shade that I know it's easy for me to get use out of. This is a rather neutral shade, to be honest. Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this shade. So with this one, for sure, my goal will be to hit pan. There's somewhere on the eyeshadow already. Then let's pick a shade from the Soft Glam palette. So I'm going to put here to my pretty random app numbers from 1 through 14. I hope we don't get the black, but if we get it, then that's what I'm going to be working on. But let's see what we get. Number 10. Oh, not the black. Oh, we got the shade Burnt Orange. So, over here, this shade. You know what? I'm going to re-roll because this shade is way too close for the shade Salted Caramel in my Panda palette. So, no point on me to work on two shades so close to each other, especially when my goal is to finish Salted Caramel. I just want to focus on that. Let's pick another shade. Number 6. You're kidding me. Okay, so now we get the shade Bronze, which is basically a gold eyeshadow. So I'm going to re-roll again because we do have the gold shade from the Huda Beauty palette. Sure, that one is brighter than this shade, but I just don't want to work on two golds. I think this is something that can happen when you do have a really neutral eyeshadow collection, that you keep picking the same shade over and over. Okay, shade 3. Orange Soda. So it is this shade over here. This shade is at least way lighter than the shade Salted Caramel from the chocolate bar, but let me swatch this one. You know what, I think this shade is still too close. I would wear them exactly the same way, so kinda like as a transition shade. I know as long as I'm working on Salted Caramel, I'm not going to bother using this one. Of course I could layer them, so first go in with this shade and then with Salted Caramel, but the thing is that on that case I would need to bring the eyeshadow look pretty high, and I don't like doing that. I like to keep the look lower nowadays, so I just don't think this is different enough from Salted Caramel, so let's re-roll. Number 5. Okay, so now we got a shade that is different enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got the shade Sultry over here, which is a beautiful shimmery plum. Absolutely stunning shade. I think I have worn it maybe once from this palette, but this is gorgeous. Okay, this one actually, now that I swatched it, it looks even more just like bronzy. Not that much necessarily plum, but it definitely has that kind of like reddish burgundy undertone to it, so really different from anything that I'm working on right now. And yeah, really nice shade for this time of the year too, now that we're still kind of like in the winter. In Finland, March is already considered spring month, but the weather is really wintry, so maybe I can figure out a look where I do have this one that is for those more gloomy days. So yeah, this one I'm going to go with, and I'm really excited about that. So let me still show you a close-up of my color story. Really warm neutral, as you can see, but hey, this is just my vibe when it comes to eyeshadows, so I don't have a lot of colorful eyeshadows, so you cannot really expect to see those shades in my projects and me wearing those on my eyes. But yeah, I am excited about the new color story. I am excited about the progress on chocolate bar palette. So, as I said, for March I do want to really focus on the shade Salted Caramel from the chocolate bar palette. To be honest, I don't know if I will have any re-rolls in my Pantosh eyeshadows in next month. We will see. I think I want to pick one of these shades to be truly a focus shade. Well, my type from Colourpop, the single for sure, I can pair with Salted Caramel. With the other shades I need to still think about it, but I'm really enjoying the colors that I have here. But yeah, that is everything for today. If you liked it, please put thumbs up, and if you want to see more of my progress on panning, please consider subscribing. I do have also some other really exciting content to come. I'm starting to make a little bit more style videos, and when it comes to makeup, I have actually decided to go on a full-on beauty replacements only no buy for the rest of this year. So an introduction for that should be coming really soon, but I'm going to start it tomorrow. And now that I put it out there, I cannot back anymore, but the intro will be somewhere in March for that. But yeah, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching this video and see you on my next one. Bye bye!